Good morning. My name is Kyle Houchins. I'm a tech and a trainer for McNeil, and this is Getting Started Rhino for Windows. Today, we're going to build this little mouse, and I'm going to move the sketch a lot so you don't see how terrible it is. If you are new to these sessions, the way these work are a little bit different than most software demos. Typically, the day of or the day before, I make some kind of sketch that looks like it was drawn with a potato. And I put it away. I don't look at it. I don't practice it. I don't think about it. And then I look at it again now when we're getting started. And the idea is I want to simulate what happens when you're sitting in your office and somebody throws a sketch over the wall and says, build this. You have no idea what it is or what you're doing or anything like that, which is very similar to my life when I was running a consultancy for 20 years. I did this a lot. I had people throw sketches over my wall that looked like they were drawn with a potato and said, make this into something magical. So we're going to try and do that. This sketch is very potato generated. It's pretty awful. But the idea behind this is it's going to be a computer mouse. There is some very interesting things that are going on in this shape, and I would like to take a second to talk strategy. And the idea behind this is we're going to do it in, I think we're going to do it in SubD. We'll see. We'll see what the voices in my head tell me what to do. But I think SubD is probably the way we're going to go. And if we do a little analysis on this from a form point of view, not a sketch quality point of view, because the sketch is terrible. We are going to, let's see, let's drag this down here. This is Sketchbook Pro, by the way. I like Sketchbook Pro for, even though it's not ours, I like it. It's good. So if you haven't seen the rule of three video, this is going to rely a lot on that information. The rule of three, I'll do a 2-second recap on what rule of three is. Rule of three essentially is it takes 3 points to make a corner. And if we have an anchor point and then we're going to make a corner, 1, 2, 3, and then an anchor point. This is rule of three right here. If you want a sharper corner, you move the points closer together. If you want a softer corner, obviously we're going to move them farther apart. This does the exact same thing in SubD. If we grab a SubD cube and we look at, say, we get rid of these guys, and then we get rid of, we can leave that. And we look at the points on this, turn on the points for the SubD, you'll notice, what do we have here? 1, 2, 3, right? And if we take these edges here and we slide them like this and like this, what happens? As these points get closer together, these corners get sharper. As they get farther apart, they get softer, okay? And the concept that I really want everybody to understand here is this is not how we make corners. We don't do this. No. We don't do that. We do this. And the reason is, if we look at this under a curvature comb and we analyze these curves and we get our display scale, something that's not insane, you can see the difference between why we do 3 points versus a bajillion points, right? The more points you have in a curve, the more you're telling Rhino you have to put the line through these points. So the fewer points you have, the more Rhino gets to say, well, I'm just going to generate a perfectly beautiful mathematical curve between those points. If these points are this close together, Rhino has to develop a perfectly mathematical clean curve between these 2 points, but then also these and these and these and these and these and these and these. And if you have not done a good job of placing these points, your curve is going to be all scribbly, which is how you end up with a curvature column that looks like nitroglycerin in a paint shaker. All right. So So we want to make sure that we are placing things only in threes. And so knowing that, what we're going to do, let's go back to our sketch here, is we're going to analyze this thing from that point of view. And if we look at this shape, okay, we've got one shape here. Now, there's going to be an edge there, there's going to be an edge there, and there's going to be an edge there. So if we look at this in top view, right, and we say this is going to be our center line, we've also got a curve going this way, and we've got a curve going this way. So what does that tell us? We need an edge here, we need an edge here, and we need an edge there. Because what does this give us the ability to be able to do? It gives us the ability to be able to move this point and this point in or out, which it gives us the ability to be able to curve it this way or this way. Same thing here, right? We've got a point here and here, which allows us to be able to curve it this way or that way if we wanted to, okay? These are our anchors. That's it. 4 points, 4 patches, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's all we need to create the top of this model. Now, if we create the top of this model, then the rest of the model kind of builds itself. And what I'm talking about there is, let me go back to my layer stack here. I love it when they change the interface on this, and then I get to look dumb because I can't find any of my stuff. Where are you? All right, never mind. So then what we've got here is we've got this shape right here, okay? There's a little edge that comes off this that then fades out back here. That we can just connect right off the edge of here. And this is going to give us an opportunity to use a soft crease on this corner, because this corner is going to be sharp here and it's going to fade out back here. Okay. Now, moving down the model, right? So let's just say we're going to complete that. This is back more like that, right? So we've got our top surface, we've got our transition surface, then we've got this surface down here, and I'll even change colors so we can see the difference. Now we've got a section here, and this section here kind of comes up like that. It's got a concave shape in it. If we look at this from front view, right, if we look at it, draw a section through here like this, what happens to this thing? Well, it looks like this. It comes over the corner, and then it tucks in like this, right? This is this right there. Well, how are we going to make that? Rule of 3. Anchor, anchor, center point. This gives us the ability to move this in or out. Okay, so knowing that, we can say, well, there's got to be an edge that comes through the center of this thing, like that. And those are probably going to connect. And this is our center line. This is probably going to connect. This will connect back here, probably with a tiny little edge back here. Probably be a single edge back there. Okay, and then now we're going to work our way down the part again. There's another transition here where this thing rolls over like that, and then it comes back in and it's flat on the bottom. So this shape down here, we might actually want to start and break the model here, and we might want to start with this shape first and this shape second. So if we were to do that, we would essentially, if we're looking at this, if we flipped it over and looked at the bottom, let's just say the bottom shape looks something like this. Well, we've got a curve here, a curve here, a curve here, and a curve here. How many edges do we need? Exactly 1 in each direction. Okay? So we don't need 20. We don't need 80 edges. This thing does not need to look like a fishnet stocking. It needs to be very, very, very light. All of the edge transitions in here, when you make a transition from one surface to another surface, how many edges do you need here? You need 1 there, 1 there, and 1 there. That's going to give us a little curve. Okay, we can do this with a bevel. So we'll build the model without this to start with, right? And we'll get it about where we want to do it. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll actually just build this with a crease, and then I'll come back as a secondary operation once I've got the model straightened out and to figure out where I want it when I start refining my transitions. And then I'll add a bevel and then get rid of this crease. That just helps me kind of be able to figure out what I'm doing. Okay. And so we'll start with our base plate, and then we'll bring this up. And again, we only need the minimum amount of stuff in order to be able to do this. If this surface right here has a curve in it, then we're going to need an edge through here. But only one. We don't need 10. We don't need 50 edges. We just need one. Okay? Look good? All right, so let's jump back into the model and try and figure out what in the world it is that we're going to try and do with this thing, now that I've procrastinated enough and try and convince myself that I know how to do this. So with every other model, all right, that I do in these videos, we start with the picture frame command, and picture, I guess it used to be picture frame, now it's picture. And I find the image on my desktop, I bring it in, I take it, and I'm going to pop this little side thing out, and I'm going to click on the object. The little yellow dot is going to light up. That's how I know that this material is associated with this object. I'm going to click on the material, and we're just going to crank the object transparency up a little bit. And the reason we're going to do that is it's going to fade out. It's going to make it a little easier for us to draw over it. And then I'm going to position this model somewhere over the center origin. And then we should probably figure out kind of how big this thing is. Everybody comes after me in the comments because I never do the scale for these demos, but let's do this somehow. Let's call that about 4 inches. And I know everybody also comes for me because I do it in inches, but I'm old version, and we can talk about that later. All right, so that's about 4 inches. I'm just going to make a little hockey stick, and then I'm going to scale the drawing from 0 to about there, and then about there. And that gives us approximate scale, okay? We can always dial it in later once we print it and get it in our hand and figure out what it feels like and whether it's too big, too small, all that kind of stuff. But that gives us a general scale, and we can verify this by just throwing a linear dimension on it, and it's 4-ish. Was the mouse sketch intended to be included in the download materials? Good God, no, I'm not giving you this sketch. It's terrible. You can't have it. Draw your own mouse and build it. Don't build this awful lopsided potato. Build your own and make it much better. If you want the sketch, I'll do this for you. Here, we'll do this. I'll turn the transparency off. You can pause the video and take a screenshot of it, but please, for the love of God, don't use this sketch as a reference for anything other than to show how to take an awful sketch and hopefully make a cool model from it. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move this sketch out of the modeling window, and the reason that I do that is if you don't, and we say, for instance, we throw something in here and we look at it in shaded mode or rendered mode, the rendered mode bites the sketch. So what I usually do is I move this out here so I can see it, and from front view it's still in the right, orientation, but it's outside the modeling window, so it doesn't get in the way. So the last thing I'm going to do is take this and assign it to a layer. So just click the object, right click a layer, change object layer, and then I'm going to lock that layer, and then that way I can turn it on and off. And if I had more than one sketch, if I had like a right view, top view, something like that, I would put each one on a layer, because then I can turn them on and off individually. But that's the basic setup. That's kind of like all we need to get this thing going. So the next step is going to be to bring up the SubD tab here And I'm going to bring up a single rectangle, and I'm going to set the X and Y to 1 and 1 because I want one single face. We're going to start this at 0, and we're going to bring this to about where the center point, where the apex of that curve is right there. Bring it right about there. And I'm going to hit the tab key to go to box mode. We're going to go back to wireframe. And I'm going to bring this point, Control Shift drag to grab the point, and then use gumball. I'm going to just drag it down like that. Control Shift click this edge, drag the extrude dot on the gumball, Control Shift drag that point, gumball down like that. And if we go to the tab key, we can see how close we are. Just do a little refinement here. I always say model in box mode, refine in smooth mode. And then I'm going to take this, I'm going to mirror it. And then I'm going to select all this and join. And the SubD joined edges are going to be smooth. And then if we go back to smooth mode, you can see that we're pretty close to where we need to be. Maybe this can come forward a little bit. Maybe these edges right here can come out a little bit. Ideally, we would not like to have this little inversion right there. So maybe we pull this like that, and we pull this like that. I get questions all the time like, how do I know where the corners are? Well, I just kind of do. They're there. If you want to see them, you can always turn the points on and leave them on. And that way, that allows you to be able to see what's going on there. But I tend to just kind of know where they are. Okay. And so this gives us kind of the basics of what we're doing. And this center edge right here, if we pull it forward, it biases this way. If we pull it backward, it biases that way. So we can kind of decide, like, is it like rear heavy or is it front heavy? In this case, I think it's mostly rear heavy. And this is going to get us where we need to go. Now, this corner right here is not landing exactly like we wanted, which means that there is possibly a compound corner going on up here. And if I go to box mode, you can also see where that inversion is happening. See that right there? So if I take all of these points and I scale them to 0 and flatten them out, that gets rid of that inversion, but it also softens this corner a little bit. And because of that, now I need to ask myself, do I have enough points in this thing or not? Because right now what's happening is what's making this shape right here is this point, and this point. That is where that curve is coming from. If that is not enough, I might need one more edge. And if I do, I can simply add it by going to the SubD tools and drag one more edge into this thing. Now, notice what's happening here. See how it changed this shape, right? And if we look at the layout on it, it's changed it a little bit. We might want to do a little bit of adjusting here and get that a little bit smoother. Now, are we going to add 10 points in there? No, we are not going to add 10 points. We're going to add only the stuff that we need in order to get the shape that we want. Okay? So I was a little ambitious when I said we only needed 3 because this is actually a compound shape. Now, in the front view, if we look at this thing in the front view, we see it's got this kind of a curvature going on here. So I might need to actually, in order to be able to work on this thing, because I'm in top view, I may need to actually have a second version of this sketch down here. And I might want to have, might want to be working on this in the front view, and I might want to be working on this in the top view. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to unlock this. I'm going to copy paste, and I'm going to rotate this -90. And let's do this the way that I should have done it in the first place, which is to put the top view sketch in the top view and the front view sketch in the front view. We'll call that about right. Let's drop that down like that. And then let's take this guy. Let's rotate this 90. That should line up vaguely with that. And then now we've got this front view sketch. I'm going to slide this up a little bit and say that we can work on that. So let's lock these again. So now what I can do is I need to be able to copy this shape right here, right? And so I can do a couple of things. If I take this and I turn the points on, I can take this object, move it down here. I'm going to use gumball to rotate it up like that. And then I'm going to just grab the points and I'm going to bend it from here to here like that. And it's going to get close-ish, right? And then I can take this and then I can just move it. And then I can pull this where it needs to be. And I like bend because it keeps it nice and, kind of organized. And this is a little rearward biased, so we're going to do that. And that gives us kind of our basic bend. And then this definitely has a bend. It has a crown from the front view. So I'm going to drag select the center points right here. Actually, I'm going to drag these. I'm going to leave those alone. And I'm just going to add my crown to it. And so now if we look in shaded mode, we've got a nice, it's backwards. We've got a nice smooth shape. Because this ended up being a compound curve and not just a simple curve, we needed a curve here and then it accelerates. So this is our center point and that's our center point. And that gives us all of the information that we need in order to have that shape. So the next transition that happens is this entire edge, if I shift double click this edge, has a ring around it. And if I shift drag, control shift and drag holding down the control key, right? So there's a little finger jujitsu going on there. If I just start dragging this, it only goes in one direction. If I hold down shift, it goes in all directions. And if I hold down control, it extrudes instead of just scales. And I end up with an additional ring of faces. And I can grab these and just drag them down a little bit like that. And that gives me the beginnings of my transition to get around the corner. Now, I might need another edge in order to get around that corner, and so I can do that by just doing that. I'm going to do this in box mode here. And that gives me the ability now to be able to determine whether or not that transition has crown. So see that? I can go in or out on that. Little sets of 3. That also gives me the ability to be able to add a chamfer or a bevel around this thing and help me break this edge. And we just keep an eye on it as I'm going around here. And everybody always says, well, you don't have symmetry on them. I'm like, yeah, I know. I can always add it later. And I kind of like the ability to be able to determine whether or not the symmetry is better on one side or whether the shape is better on one side than the other. I don't know. That's just kind of how I roll. We can argue whether that's good or bad or dumb or smart or whatever. A lot of people online seem to have opinions on how smart I am. That's fine. I have my own opinions on how smart I am too, depending on the day. All right. So how are we doing? So we are now in the position where we need to start matching this some more. And the way that this is drawn, it looks like we've actually got a lot more crown than we're showing. So let's get there. Let's pull this all the way down to here. Let's pull that out to there. This would be easier to do in wireframe. And let's grab that edge, pull that all the way down. And you can immediately see why, if this model was complex, if it had a million edges in it, how difficult this would be to manage. This is why you keep SubD models simple, 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 simple. The very first thing I do when I get a SubD model from anybody is I just start deleting stuff. And they're like, whoa, 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 what are you doing? I'm like, well, first of all, you've got 2,000 too many edges. So we'll go into smooth mode and just refine this just a hair. See how that little S shape is occurring? That's because 1, 2, 3. So that is what's causing that. So if you're wondering where it's coming from, those are the 3 points that control it. It's all just about managing those little sets of 3. If you can keep your thinking about your SubD models literally limited to that simple of a layout, you'll never have topology problems. Because you'll always be able to go, well, where's that dent coming from? Well, where are the 3 points that make up that dent? Once you find them, you can straighten them out. All right, so there's our top part, and it looks like there's a little swooshiness going on here, and that might just be because the sketch is awful. It might be because that's actually the shape. We'll figure it out later. And there's this little creasy thing that runs around here. I'm going to deal with that later, but I think for the time being, what I might do is I might just crease it so that I can keep an eye on it. And now this thing is sharp. See that? So now I can actually put a hard edge in there. And I might leave that crease. I might take it out. I usually don't leave creases because they tend to render poorly. Anything that's got a very sharp creased edge on it usually ends up being looking fake when you render it. So now we've got this next piece down here, right? And just to kind of highlight it, I think we're going to go after kind of this shape right here, because everything below going in this direction is base. That's a separate part, and there's a color break there. So I'm actually going to kind of try and factor that in. And there's going to be one edge right here, little tiny edge right there. So we're going to keep that. And I'm going to just grab this entire edge, and I'm going to extrude down. I'm going to do this in box mode. And the shape of this changes, right? This is going to now be our center edge. And I'm going to stick this, also easier to do in wireframe. I'm going to follow that kind of wave pattern that this shape makes, right? This kind of uppy downy shape that goes on in there. And that's going to be our little teeny edge. So this is 1, this is 2, we need a third. So I'm going to take this and I'm just going to extrude it one more time. And you're like, wow, this seems really simple. Yes, yes. If your SubD models are making you crazy, you're working too hard. SubD is easy. Don't tell your clients. Tell them it's hard. Bill them for it being hard. But you and I know it's not hard. It's actually pretty magical. So now I can decide whether or not this little piece has crown, in or out, right? And well, I'm going to just put a hold on that for the time being. I usually add a little positive crown just to keep it going. Now, something weird is happening here, so I need to figure out what that is. And I think that is just the look. That's okay. I'm going to pull these 2 edges in just a hair, just to give a little positive crown. All right, how we doing? That looks good, but it's super boring because it doesn't have that nice swoopy inward cut, right? Which is what this thing is all kind of about. So I'm going to just start pulling this in. Look at that. This is where You turn your mics on and go, ooh, ah, no, don't. You still don't have to edit it out. We can determine how much ooh or how much ah we add to this because it's simple. We know that this point is going to control the ooh ah here, and we know that this point is going to control the ooh ah there, and we know that this edge controls whether or not we get some meh or some whoo, like that, right? Pull this in a little bit. Pull this out a little bit. See how nice and easy that is? Pull this down a little bit like that. Pull this guy down a little bit. If we had 1,000,000 points, this would be really, as the French say, very painful. Everybody's like, but that's not French. I don't speak French, but I figure they would think it was painful. They'd also be smoking. All right, so let's take a look at this and see. Now, we've got a little bit of like back and forth wiggle on here. Let's straighten that out. I'm going to grab this entire edge. I'm going to pick a point somewhere on this edge. I just double click the center of the gumball to break it loose. And I'm going to use O snap, and I'm going to snap it here. And if it doesn't snap, there is a setting on the gumball called snappy dragging. This makes gumball respect O snaps, and if you don't have this setting on, I highly recommend doing it. So I'm going to double click the rotation icon, which makes the gumball spin, and I'm going to just snap it. I'm going to pick which one I want this to line up with, and I've now created a line. I'm going to just scale to 0. See how those all snap into place? Cool, right? I like that. That's a quarter, so I'm going to leave that alone. I don't like... You want your box mode to be nice and organized. All of your lines should be nice and organized. What you don't want to see is this. You don't want like this edge, like that's, no, don't do that. Keep your stuff nice and organized. All right, and now we've got basically that part. Now, this edge, we can determine this part of this edge if we actually need that or not. If we don't, we can get rid of it and let that Z out there. In fact, we could even possibly even get rid of that one and just let this edge be the one that pushes that in or out and let this soften out there. And every time we get rid of an edge, Rhino says, okay, well, I guess I'll figure out what that shape does. And Rhino's a lot better at figuring out shapes than we are. So let it do it. I'm going to leave that for now. And we'll decide whether or not we're gonna need it later or not. So let's talk about the rest of this thing. And actually, I think this needs to come down more like that. Little refinements in smooth mode, because those little refinements end up being big moves in box mode, and it's really easy to do something crazy like this in box mode, and it looks fine in smooth mode. You're like, yeah, that looks fine. And then you go to box mode, oh, no, no. That's why I model in box mode, because it helps you be able to keep this all, super organized. Okay. So we're getting close here. This back, there's a little bit of kind of fubbliness going on here that I don't like, so we might need to just kind of even those a little bit. And then the bottom shape on this thing is an interesting thing. It actually there's a sharp edge that kind of starts back here, and then as it fades forward, it kind of dies right about here, and it goes away. Now, in SubD, that means that I actually do have to have an edge. Even if that edge dies, it does actually have to go all the way through. because then what I can do is I can determine, what the placement is. If it's got a sharp edge, my edges are going to look like that, right? And then this point right here, I can either crease that, soft crease it, put a bevel on it, whatever. But I need to have an edge there in order to be able to have that transition. I might need to have two little teeny edges, right? That would be a bevel. But I do need an edge that goes all the way through there, and then I need an edge that goes on the bottom in order to be able to wrap over. So I need that if I'm looking at this in section, right? If you're wondering what in the world I'm talking about. All right, so let's add that. So I'm gonna double click this again, and I'm gonna just bring this down, and we'll go back to smooth mode, and then we can do a little bit of, we'll do it in box mode. So I'm gonna pull this kind of down like that. I'm gonna pull this kind of over like that. This one is gonna come up. We want it to wrap around the corner. Something like that. And I don't love what's happening right there. So that one looks like it needs to come down like that. Straighten those out a little bit. And it kind of, as we roll around this thing, we'll just take a look at it and see. Now, you want to kind of sight down your box mode, right? We want to look down this thing and say, are the things that are supposed to be concave or convex, are they concaving or convexing enough? Are they actually convexing or concaving the way that I want them to do that? Do I have anything crazy going on where my box mode, very obviously has a flaw in it, right? Fix that stuff. Just straighten it out. And then we go back into smooth mode. We take a look at our shape. And now we can start refining because we've got everything close. Now we can start refining and say, well, we're going to do these little moves and we're going to fix some of the little problems, right? Just little refinements. We're not going to do anything massive in smooth mode because we can mess up our box mode horribly, but we don't want to do that. So this edge actually is going to come down like that. This edge is going to kind of come down like that. And we're starting to get that nice kind of OG flow, all right, which we like. We're going to make this nicer than the sketch. And we're going to pull this kind of in like that. All right, we are starting to try to de-potato this a little bit. Moving these points a little bit to determine where that crown is coming from, right? And it's just 1, 2, 3. Those are the edges. So this is the one that's going to determine the crown. Once you get a handle on that, once you have figured out, once the aha moment of that 3 edges kicks in, SubD is going to just demystify itself for you. You're just going to be like, oh, well, I'm a sailor. All right, now the last thing we need to do is come around the corner and create the bottom. So I'm going to extrude straight down just because it's easy. And then I'm going to shift drag on a scale handle and I'm going to wrap it under like that. And then I'm going to scale it flat in the Z, which is going to give me my flat bottom. And then I can determine, the sketch is a mess when it comes to the actual bottom of this thing. So imagine, if you will, this was drawn much less bad an instructor in college. Guy's name was Ken Okayama. He's a genius designer, worked for Ferrari and Pininfarina, all this kind of stuff. He always used to say, these need to be more, less bad. This here needs to be more, less bad. I always thought that was a fantastic way to describe something. What it needs to be is more, less bad. Yeah. Needs to be more of that. He always used to say, this drawing has too many lines. These lines good. These lines too many. Take these lines out. All right. So now, what we can do is we can simply close this thing up. Now, because this is a symmetrical object, we have got a nice opportunity to be able to, first of all, I'm going to crease this edge so that I don't lose it. And we're going to come up here. I guess it's looking for an interior crease. All right, never mind. We'll crease it later. So I'm going to pick these 3 edges on both sides. We're just going to run the bridge command. We're going to do 2 segments, and we're going to crease it, and we're going to join it. And these 2 didn't join because they were too far away, so we're just going to stitch. Same thing here. Shift Control, click, click, stitch. Got a hotkey for that if you're wondering how I got that. And then I'm going to grab all these edges, Shift double click, Control Shift double click, and then I'm going to crease them all. And that gives me that nice flat bottom. So that is the primary shape, okay? And now we can start thinking about things like, what can we do? And you might think like, yay, we're done. Now what we can start thinking about is refining this thing. And in this case, I'm going to add some soft creases here. And I'm going to click here, and I'm going to crease this like 90% because I want that to be sharp. And then I'm going to crease this to 0 because I want that crease to fade out. And as I get closer to this now, as I move this guy up or down, you can see that that gets nice and sharp. And then it fades out towards the back. And I think I might have a crease on this, so I'm going to uncrease that one. Kept creasing here somewhere. So let's try that again. Let's crease this. Let's do 90 there. And leave that at 0. We might want to even pull. We might even want to do 90 here and here. Is there a place where we can find learning the basics and the commands? Yes, I'm glad you asked. Help, learn Rhino. Tutorials and samples. Level 1 training manual, PDF. Boom. This is the gold standard of everything you need to know about getting going with Rhino. This is tedious. Okay, I've learned a million software programs, and I used to be a really fastidious manual reader. I used to take manuals on vacation. That's how big of a nerd I am. And I would read them on the beach like a John Grisham novel. And my wife would be like, "You're embarrassing me." I would read these cover to cover. It's tedious. It's a little bit painful, but it also is the type of thing that when you get done, the time that you invest in it is it's worth it. So I would highly recommend it. Okay. This one right here. This is, let's go ahead and throw a crease here. And that's going to sharpen that up nicely. Maybe push that one down the road a little bit. And let that fade out. Make sure that that's 0 at the end. It is. So then we start to get this kind of sharpness in there, which is really nice because that's what we want. And then same thing down here. We want this edge right here. Actually, maybe this edge. We want that. One of these. Let's try this one. Let's see what that one looks like. If we were to crease this one and we were to come back here and we were to say this was 90 and let that fade out. So that gives that nice sharpness, and that gives us the ability to kind of control how much that kind of comes around like that. So that I'm actually happy with, because now one of the most difficult things about SubD, I'll tell you this right now, is trying to get that balance of sharp and soft. That can be a really difficult thing to try and manage. And in this case, this edge right here might not be doing me any good. And let's try and get rid of it and see. I actually like what happened there. See how that front sharpened up? So now we've got that kind of double edge right there. Let's put a different color. This is a terrible color for demo. I also don't like this environment. Let's put a different environment in here. I like this automotive studio environment. It's for chasing highlights is quite nice. There we go. Ooh, that looks better. So now we can start to see the kind of the beautiful stuff that you can get with SubD. And we've added a little dink right here that we need to figure out where it is. And it's just going to come from scaling these guys in a little bit more. When you start throwing creases into the mix, now you've got to manage a little bit of an esoteric element, because creases tend to influence that kind of rule of 3 thing in ways that you may or may not like, which is why a lot of people use bevels instead of creases. I tend to use creases only in a situation where I want like a nice fadey one, because it's easy. See how there's a little pupus back here that we want to get rid of? Let's see where that is. So that is coming from, well, imagine that. Look at there. That's where the problem is. You can see it very clearly because our box mode is a mess. If we didn't keep that simple, we'd have a very hard time sorting that out. And the second you start letting your box mode kind of get out of control, then the model starts to kind of take on a life of its own, and it can be really difficult to manage. Like me in my teen years. See how we've got a little mess back here? Let's fix that. Any places you see that kind of crossing, we don't want that. And you'd be amazed at what these subtle little cleanups will do for your model. See, we've got a cross down here. We don't want that. Now, somebody inevitably is going to be like, well, the model's asymmetrical. I know, it's fine. We can always add the symmetry back later. That is the single easiest thing to do. Once we get the thing kind of sorted out the way we want it to be, we can always go back and just pick which side we want and reflect it. That's a super easy thing to do. Let's just do some housekeeping around here, and let's just, who knows, you may mess around and find out that one side of this you like better than the other side. And if that's the case, then it's a simple matter of just simply mirroring that side over. Now, the front of this thing feels really fat to me right here. So I'm going to grab these 4 faces and I'm just going to make them, let's snap gumball down here and let's scale these down a little bit. And then and I know we're kind of deviating from the sketch, but when the sketch is telling you to do something that's ugly, do something different. That's the magic of being able to make decisions in 3D instead of trying to copy a sketch. We want to be designers and artists, not copiers, right? So just now we're in the fun stuff. Now we're just pushing highlights around. This is where it starts to get fun. We can even start deciding, like, do we need edges or not? We can start getting rid of stuff. But I'd say for the most part that we're probably in a good shape, and we're sitting at about an hour. So that's probably good for the main form. This is something where it sits right now. Let's go to shaded view one more time. Where it sits right now is probably, if this was a client gig, I would probably throw this through a printer and I would get my hands on it and I would decide whether or not I liked how it felt and whether there was any major things that needed to be changed in the shape before I invested a ton more time into it. This is probably the point where I would throw this through a printer. But we end up with, like, gorgeous highlights, right? Really, it's like very zoomy. Has a nice flat bottom on it. So at this point, what I would probably do is say, thanks for coming and cancel the demo. No, we'll finish it up. Is I would go to my layer stack here and I would take this and I would copy to an object layer, and I would just hide that layer. And the reason that I would do that is because I would want to keep copy of this in case I get down the road and I decide that I did something dumb that I don't like, and I want to recover and get back to what I had before. Okay, I can always get it back that way. Because now what we're going to do is we're going to run the toNURBS command. We're going to spell it right. Who went to art school? And I'm going to delete the objects, which seems counterintuitive, but because we copied it, we still have a copy of it here if we need it, right? So that's why we did that. Now, it converts and it turns into a NURBS object, and there's a lot of isoparams here, and a lot of people get panicked when they see this because everything that I've been telling you up to this point is about simplicity. And to some extent, you'd be right, except for the fact that these surfaces are very, very high quality, depending on even with the amount of isoparams that are there. If I run a zebra on this thing, they're really nice. If I emap this thing, all right, so don't get too bent out of shape about the number of isoparams and all that kind of stuff, because what we're going to do is we're just going to start doing the rest of our detailing. And in this case, there's this bezel on the top. So this is now just a Rhino model now. So now we're going to just add some rounded curves or rounded corners. Now we're just doing regular Rhino modeling stuff. And maybe we'll grab these, pull those in just a hair, and we can just project this onto the model. We can push pull this, And I don't want this to follow the normals. I want it to go straight. So I'm going to just set a direction. And so now instead of following the surface normal, it's going to follow just straight. And push-pull is going to give me that little detail. I would probably want to put some kind of transition on this. And so just probably because it's easy, what I'm going to do is extract this and this, delete that little transition that's in between there, and then a nice little cheat is if I scale this in, let's scale it in 1D this direction, and then just a tiny little bit in that direction. And then if we throw let's change this, a blend surf on here, we can get a little transition going on there, and I'm going to just do a tangent. And this is a nice way to get, just break that edge. If you don't break the edge when you render it, it looks really weird. It shows up as fake because that little highlight isn't there. See that little highlight? These little like dink, dink right there. If you don't have those, it looks like unfinished and weird when you render it. So let's finish up the rest of this. There's a little button here. So I'm going to just find the center, make it rounded. I'm doing the curve down here because it's easy to find an edge to center it, and then I can always use Gumball to scale this thing the way that I need it to be. I'm going to project this onto the surface. And let's do the other one while we're here. It's got a little LED. I can snap to the center now. Place it there. Project this down. And now I've got curves on the surface that I can push-pull. This one goes down like that. This one goes up. And again, I don't want it to be normal to the surface because it's actually going the wrong way. So I want to just set a direction for it to be straight. Like that. And when it comes down to detailing on this, like this is one of my favorite cheats, is to just use push-pull to get something quickly, delete the transition, and then just use blend surf to get your fillets. And then that makes a very nice little thing, right? And then you get this all joined up. And then when you render it, you get those little edge sparkles, those little edge fillet highlights that make this look like a finished piece instead of something that's not. And then the last thing I would probably do, since this is an LED, I would probably push-pull this back up a little bit, like that. And then I might even blend off this edge just a hair. Something really tiny. Like that. Just so that if I were to put a material on that, you'd still get that little edge highlight on there. And the same thing here. I could probably blend off this edge, something tiny. This preview, by the way, if the preview is bigger than your edge, the fillet's going to fail 100%. Rhino gets beat on a lot for filleting, and it's not entirely undeserved, I'm not going to lie. But there is a user error aspect of it that, like, a lot of people just expect it to do something that is kind of unrealistic because of the shapes that they're doing. The other thing is this button actually has a little cut line around it. So I'm actually going to put that in here. And we can argue on whether this is a good way or a bad way or whatever. That's fine. You don't like it? Make your own video. And I'm going to just tuck this down like that. And then I'm going to actually do a blend surface between here and here. And let me get to the interior shapes. And I'm going to pull this one down a little bit. And then I'm going to pull this one in a little bit. And that's going to give the indication of a little cut line around there. But it's also soft. And I like that. I like that because it gives you those little highlights as you're rendering. And I think those are important for realism when you're trying to get done at the end of the day. So it's got this little rolly guy in here. Let's figure out where that lies. And this, I'm just going to shift drag. I'm going to scale that out like that. And this, let's have some fun with this guy. This has some detail on it. It's got like a center rib that's lower, and then it's got a section that's bigger. So I'm going to Control Shift click this. I'm going to Shift drag Control. Oh, you're not going to give it to me. Rotten. All right, so I'm going to extrude it first. Shift drag. And then I'm going to bring this back and snap it here. And then I'm going to grab this edge and extrude it out. That looks like something misbehaved here. Get rid of this first. That's what I need to do. Shift drag. So that edge is coming out. I'm going to bring it back here so it lines up. And then I'm going to grab this, scale it out. And then join, cap, and let's mirror it. I know it's too big, but it's fine. I'm going to get rid of this first. Mirror. Join that. Scale it in. Control Shift click. I'm going to scale these out. And then it's got some little chamfers on it or something like that. So let's go ahead and throw those in. And these are all massive, so we're going to set all. Something like that. And then it's got like a little pattern around it, a little variation of some sort. So I'm going to just do that with a cube. And I'm going to do that from the center. And let's Control Shift drag and just give this a little taper. And then we're going to transform, array, polar, use the center, make this about 50. 40. 38 feels about right. We'll center it, scale it in that direction. Call that good. I'm going to try and Boolean it and see if it all goes together. If it doesn't, I was going to say if it doesn't, we'll do it in a couple of pieces, but in this case it did. So let's center this up. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually Boolean subtract this as a cheat. I'm going to Boolean subtract this from this. And then I'm going to just scale this the tiniest little bit so that it gets that little cut there. And then the last thing that we need to do on the side of the buttons, and I'm going to do that with push-pull. We're going to just draw our shape. Notice the 1, 2, 3-ness of my curves, right? This is the curve. There's a little corner right there. There's a little corner right there. And there's a little corner right there. So 1, 2, 3 makes up this part. 1, 2, 3 makes up that part. 1, 2, 3 makes up that part. So if I need to sharpen this a little bit, I can mess with that. And I feel like I missed the location down there by quite a bit. So let's take these and we're going to project them on. And I hate how that looks actually on the part. So let's fix it. So let's do this instead. Let's do this with history. So we're going to do always record history. And we're going to project this back on. And now that we've got this on, I can take these curves. Let's just move them out here so we can see what they're doing. And I can modify this curve, and the projected curve is going to update. So let's fix all of the nastiness that's on this thing, and let's iterate with this a little bit. So I'm going to pull this up, and let's get this to work with the form a lot better than it was before. It's really difficult to try and like take things from just purely sketch point of view and translate them, you know, directly into 3D and have them work the way that you expect them to. There's a lot of, when you get into this part of the model, there's a lot of iterating in order to try and get the curves to do what you want them to do in 3D. Because we're designing in 3D, right? We're not just copying stuff. We want this thing to look good as an actual object. So it doesn't really matter at the end of the day what the sketch is doing, as long as the 3D part looks good. So that is now the rule, and the sketch is just going to have to deal with it. Right? It's like being in a relationship. Somebody's gonna lie to you. You're gonna be skeptical. The sketch is gonna lie to you. Then it's time to be very skeptical. So I'm gonna use push-pull, and I'm just gonna pull these out a little bit. Like that. And that's fine that it broke history. And then I'm going to draw just where the split on that thing is. Could have done that with a box, but... And then I'm going to project this on. And let's see if push-pull will work with us. Let's push this in. That gives us our split between the buttons. And then if we wanted to blend that edge off, I'd probably do that. Let's blend this off. Let's see if we can go nuts here and get all of this. It's going to have to be tiny. When you run the fillet, if you see this all red like that, it's Rhino's telling you, this is going to show. So what you want is you want all of these little dudes to be gray, and you want them all to have enough room to get around each other. So something like that. See if that'll work. And typically speaking, if you pick a small enough fillet or a small enough round, and you give Rhino the opportunity to actually do what you asked it to do, it'll work. All right, and then the one last detail that was on this is there was a cut line between the top and the bottom. I'm going to play a fun trick on this. So let's go to shaded mode, and let's draw a line, and I'm going to go slightly above that. And I'm going to project this with history again. And then I'm going to pull this out, and I'm going to just double check that that's doing what I want it to do. And it looks horrible in the front, so let's fix that. And as we mess with this, we can just lay it right where we want it to be. That's better. And then in the back, I think I want it a little higher in the back. So let's call that good. And instead of actually modeling a cut line in, we could do that. Actually, we could pipe that and model it in. I want to show you something that not a lot of people know about. If I come up here and I go to the object properties, there's an object property up here called shut lining. And if I turn it on for this object and I say that is the curve that I'm going to add, shut lining, add a curve, this guy, what it's going to do is it's actually going to do a, it's going to think about it, and it's going to do it really big at this point, which is way too big. So I want to change this to 0.05. Actually lower than that. I want it to be much smaller than that. 0.05. And what it does is it modifies the render mesh, and it puts a renderable, if I can hide this now, a renderable cut line in there that doesn't actually exist. Now, if you wanted to throw this through a printer and get it, there's a way to do that. You can say extract render mesh, and it's gonna actually pull the mesh that it's using to run the display. That shut line is burned into that mesh. This will print. So the cool thing about this is you can do you can not only do shut lining, but there's a displacement thing in here. So you can add displacement to a surface. So if I come up here and I say Control-Shift-Click, and I wanted to do a displacement on just like one of these surfaces, I could add a displacement texture to that, displace it in the render mesh. You extract the render mesh, you can throw those through a printer, and it works just fine. I just did this with a part for my van, actually. I had a part that I was trying to match the stock plastic in the van, and I took a photo of the stock plastic, and I ran the photo through Adobe Substance Sampler, and I made a tile bowl pattern out of it. I applied that as a displacement mesh, and then I printed it, and it came out great. So let's do the last little bit on here, which is this detail on the side. So we've added a shut line. Let's add, there's a thing called curve piping as well. So if I take, and let's do this with history as well. So I'm going to take this shape like that, and we're almost done. So thank you for your patience. And I'm going to draw it here. Let's do it this way. This will be fun. Let's draw the bottom one like that, and then let's tween. And tween is fun. Watch this. It averages those in between them, which is cool. And because we did it with history, if I adjust one of the points, the tween updates. So if I wanted to pull this more like that, it'll update. If I wanted to pull this down here, it'll update that. So let's project these on. And then let's go back to our rendering. And it looks like that's crossing over there. So let's fix that. Let's get these guys. It's one of the nicest things about being able to do this stuff with history is you can fix problems like that. So if I turn this on and I pull this up The tween's going to update, but I can also pull that out of my shut line. And then let's pipe these. So I'm going to pick this model. Actually, sorry, I'm going to pick these curves. So I just want those curves, and then I'm going to curve pipe them. I'm going to say on, let's say 0.1, no 1, no 4, 2, something like that. And cap type is going to be domed. Accuracy, let's crank the accuracy up a little bit and say okay. So again, these exist in rendered space. And if you want to extract them, it's just a matter of extracting the render mesh, and those will print. Those are probably a little big. I'd probably make those a little smaller. Probably too big. And depending on what happens to the curve, happens to the pipe. So if I turn the points on for those, they're super complex, right? Because they're, a projected curve. But if I were to grab some of the points on this and pull these in, it changes the pipe. So you could, if you wanted to grab these curves, for instance, and get a little bit of subtlety out of this, if we go to the top view, and if I were to bend these ever so slightly, breaks history, but I can get those to fade out. And if I bent them more, I could actually tuck those into the surface and get them to fade out. All right, so let's throw couple more materials on this, and then I think we're going to call this done. So let's do a metal. We're going to bring the polish way down, and we're going to do some sub-object selecting. So I'm going to Control-Shift-Drag those guys, right-click, add to object. Same thing here. Click add to object. Let's make this an LED. So we're going to do an emission. Let's make it, it'll make it green. Want just this guy. Add to object. Now this model is still all one piece. I was doing sub-object assignment, so this isn't broken up into a bunch of little pieces. And maybe this guy, we want to do something a little bit more interesting. So let's do a new model. And then I'll drag the polish down, and we'll take the color and make it a little darker. Control-Shift-Drag to grab just the center of that. Assign to objects. And then maybe this button, same thing. Let's just get a little more detail in this. Get a view where I can just drag this guy. Now, because we Boolean this wheel out of this thing, obviously it's not going to spin because we basically made a gear out of it, but that's fine. And then if we wanted to have a part breakdown here, we would actually have to split the model using this curve. But in this case, I think I'm just going to let it roll. We could definitely, if we wanted to, use this curve, and we could split this model top to bottom and then assign an object to the bottom. Can sketch models be brought and edited in Rhino? Depends on where they're made. Generally speaking, yes, you can bring anything into Rhino and mess with it. Actually, I think this does need some color breaks. Let's color break it. In this case, when we do this, this might break up some history and stuff on this thing, but we'll deal with it if it does. Just kind of want this to land right under where that highlight is. Kind of like that. So let's split this top and bottom. And then let's split this with this curve as well. And that may jack up our... So doesn't like that. So we'll delete that. And then we'll draw a new curve. We'll lose that little shut line that we created, but that's fine. We'll do something along this line. And it looks like no, it's all right. It's fine. Thought I messed up that curve, but it's fine. Just kind of drop this right on the top of that highlight. Looks like I'm a little low here. And we'll split that. And then now we can add some more materials. Let's add like a black plastic. And we're going to make it kind of a fuzzy. Hate the red details, but something like that. Ooh, looks like we got all sorts of fun stuff going on over there. And then let's do that kind of dark metal to the bottom. They'll love it in Germany. And Italy. They like black and red in Italy and Germany for some reason. All right. So let's call that done. I think we're at an hour and a half right now. I think that gets us where we need to be. Let's hide that, and let's throw a little ray trace on it. If we wanted to do something fun, one of my favorite rendering tricks is if we just do this. Put a big backing surface back here. And then we assign the same material. I've played this note a million times. And then we drop the skylight very low. And then we put a spotlight behind the object, shining on the wall behind it. It makes this kind of, this is like the world's easiest rendering setup. Something like that. And then we're going to soften that spotlight quite a bit. We're going to make it much softer. And then we'll put a panel light right above it. I'm like, we're done. And then he keeps going. So pull the plug. It's like the Emmys. They need to shut the mic off. All right. And the arrow is pointing in the wrong direction, so we're going to 180 that. And we're going to take this guy and we're going to change it to inverse squared. And probably crank it down just a little bit. If you've seen that Formula One rendering I did for the version 7 release, this is the exact setup I used for it. It gives you nice little, right? Yeah. It's, yeah. All right. And we can crank the skylight down quite a bit, and that gets rid of the environmental shadows. And then depending on, like, we need to aim this guy a little bit backwards to get it centered. And we can make this bigger. This is what I love about this render engine, is like you can just play with it until you get it to do exactly what you want it to do. Just kind of want to get that centered right with the middle of the model. There we go. And we can mess with the materials and stuff like that as well, but that gets us kind of in the ballpark. So maybe we move this guy kind of more like that. We can start messing with the highlights depending on how big or how small we make that. We can get that little highlight going where we move this and where we aim it. A million different looks that way. All right, so we'll let that run. This metal is a little too reflective. This one might be, want just a hair more. And we want to make sure that our curves are not showing. And maybe we'll add just a hair more light to it. That's more than a hair. All right. Any questions? Does that demystify a little bit of SubD for you? Hope so. I think that's about all I have for you. We're right at about an hour and a half, which is kind of where we want to land. So I'm going to leave you to it. And if there's no other questions, I'll let you go. Great. My name's Kyle Houchins, tech and a trainer for McNeil. This was Getting Started Rhino for Windows. Go make great stuff. Thanks. Bye.